Imagine going to the store to buy a new refrigerator. There are several models that are around 24 cubic feet in size, and they all just basically turn on and off. And they're all around $2,000 each. Then there's a model that's around 30 cubic feet in size, runs for a third less energy, can preserve your food 30% longer, and can even make you a shopping list of what you're missing. And on top of that, it costs $1,500 rather than $2,000. Which fridge would you buy? And then what if the other refrigerator manufacturers told the press that there was no longer a demand for refrigerators? What would you tell them? Now multiply those costs by 25 and replace refrigerator with EV. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Today I want to talk about EV demand collapsing and why this narrative is not actually true and what this means for US and European consumers in particular. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a speed run through several articles that have popped up in the last couple of days. Of course, I will put a link to all of these in the description so you can check them all out at your leisure. Let's start with this Business Insider article that says auto executives are coming clean, EVs aren't working. Really quickly from this article, with signs of growing inventory and slowing sales, auto industry executives admitted this week that their ambitious electric vehicle plans are in jeopardy, at least in the near term. Several C-suite leaders at some of the biggest car makers voiced fresh unease about the electric car market's growth as concerns over the viability of these vehicles put their multi-billion-dollar electrification strategies at risk. Next up from the Wall Street Journal, GM scales back EV plans as buyers hesitate. Detroit automaker posts strong profit and hold that thought for a second, but cites slowing market for electric vehicles and says it's losing $200 million a week on the UAW strike, and also hold that for later. Next up from Business Insider again, Ford pauses a $12 billion EV investment after saying electric vehicles are too expensive. Reading from the article, given the dynamic EV environment, we are being judicious about our production and adjusting future capacity to better match market demand, said Ford CFO John Lawler. All told, we have pushed about $12 billion of EV spend, which includes CapEx, direct investment, and expense, he added. The company stressed it is still committed to spending on future EV models, however. We are not moving away from our second-generation EV products, Lawler said in a media briefing on Thursday. We are, though, looking at the pace of capacity that we're putting in place. We are going to push out some of that investment. And then, speaking of Ford, since they are the one legacy automaker that actually breaks out their EV versus internal combustion engine profits, you can see that actually in Q3, they lost more money than they did in Q2 at $1.3 billion loss as opposed to $1.1 billion loss in Q2 of 2023. And of course, with a profit of only $1.7 billion from their ICE cars, you can see that they barely are making any money. Their EV business is a pretty significant drag. And then from FutureCar.com, Tesla dominated US EV market in Q3 with 50% share as segment experienced 50% year-over-year growth. So first of all, you're probably looking at that 50% share and going like, wait, that's down quite a bit from 2/3, which is what Tesla has traditionally been at over the last several years. But also at the same time, there is a 50% year-over-year growth in the EV market segment. So first of all, why only 50% share? I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Tesla cut their production significantly in Q3 to do a bunch of retooling, specifically for a somewhat upgraded Model Y and a significantly upgraded Model 3. Reading from the article, Tesla holds a 50% share of the US EV market in Q3 2023, despite experiencing a decline in production last quarter, again because of the retooling. The overall EV market saw a significant growth of 50% year on year, with over 300,000 EV registrations in Q3. And that 50% year-over-year growth is really significant. That means that there is demand for electric vehicles, and it's continuing to grow, no matter what the stories coming out of Detroit and Germany are saying. And finally, really quick, because I really do like Jim Farley. I think he's an amazing CEO. Second only in my mind to Elon Musk right now. Ford CEO on Tesla. A great product is not enough in the EV business anymore. We have to be totally competitive on cost, but Tesla and Elon Musk have provided a silver lining for the company. Tesla actually gave us a huge gift with the laser focus on cost and scaling the Model Y. They set the standard, and we are now making real progress on our second and third cycle EVs that are in the midst of being developed today as we get closer to the introduction, Farley said on Ford's Q3 earnings call yesterday. So that wasn't just an off-the-cuff statement. That was actually on their earnings call that he said that. So one of the most official places that a CEO can make a statement. A big thanks to Sawyer Merritt, of course, for snagging this quote and posting it. I really appreciate it. And again, as with everything else, check out the link in the description. You should definitely follow Sawyer on X. Anyway, the start of this quote: a great product is not enough in the EV business anymore. We have to be totally competitive on cost. That is the really important crux of all of this stuff. But I would say also, he says a great product is not enough. I would say it is important to have that great product as well, but cost is king right now, especially with the economic environment such as it is. Going back to that refrigerator analogy, you have to make a competitive refrigerator, but then you also have to price it properly as well. You can't make a really fantastic refrigerator and then price it at, 4 times what everybody else is charging. You still won't sell any because people just won't be able to afford that refrigerator versus other things. And of course, with cars costing approximately 25 times what a refrigerator costs, it's a significant undertaking to purchase a car. It's the second most expensive thing that most people buy behind a house. Anyway, I think it's fantastic that Ford is focusing on their second and third gen EVs because those hopefully will be significantly better. They'll take lessons from the Model Y. They'll purchase Monroe and Associates breakdown of the Model Y and look at exactly how they did it and try to figure out how they can make their EVs more efficient to build, more cost effective, and just better, period. And of course, Farley did not mention here the fact that Tesla is also giving them the North American charging standard and giving them access to 12,000 or so superchargers in the United States. So that's a pretty big deal as well. All right, so let's take a look at the bigger picture here. The big thing is that up until a month or two ago, it was always the competition is coming, Tesla is doomed. There will be competition from all of these legacy automakers and everyone else, and Tesla's going to, lose their market share and they will be irrelevant soon. That's standard fare from 10 years ago. I mean, it's just like a decade of that. And then suddenly we get this flip to a new narrative that is EV demand is collapsing. Nobody wants to buy an EV anymore. And because of that supposed demand collapse, GM, Ford, Volkswagen, and others are slow rolling their EV production. At least that's their excuse. And then, of course, with this new narrative, we have Toyota coming out of the woodwork all of a sudden saying, we told you so. Everybody just wants a hybrid, not a pure EV. And there's news out of China, as reported by the Electric Viking recently, that up to 30 EV manufacturers in China could be going out of business soon. So first of all, we need to take a step back and realize that disruption is not a smooth thing. In retrospect, when we look back in a decade, it's all going to seem very smooth. But in the short term, you can get a lot of bumps. I expect that gas, as oil demand goes down in the next couple of years, that gas prices are going to go way down, which could cause a spike in internal combustion engine vehicle sales temporarily. It's sort of like those old floppy disks that you used to get in the old computers in like the 80s and 90s, the ones that were hard that you would stick into the computer itself. Those things cost a certain amount of money. I don't recall exactly. But as Apple and then other companies cut it out of their computers, those disks kind of collapsed in price because there were still people making the disks, but there wasn't a lot of demand anymore. So for a short period of time, those floppy disks were very inexpensive to buy. But that was just a lumpiness in the disruption of going from that type of disk to a hard drive. So with the lumpiness of EV demand that's going on right now, part of that is just noise, and you have to kind of look through that noise to see the signal. And that signal is quite clearly that electric vehicles are going to take over in the next decade at the most. I think that we're probably looking at maybe the 2027, 2028, 2030, something along those lines, where we will have 80% of all new vehicles will be electric vehicles globally. As has been the case so far, I think that the United States is probably going to be a laggard on that, so we'll be a couple of years behind. But the global trend is quite clear, and in China, it's very, very clear that EVs are the way of the future. So what about those 30 EV car companies in China that are about to go bankrupt? Well, most of those sell just a couple of hundred cars per quarter, so they're really, really irrelevant. And there's like 100, I think it might be as much as 150 EV companies in China. So you're looking at just a complete Wild West sort of situation over there. I guess that's a weird analogy since that's a United States analogy. But anyway, you've got this sort of crazy environment right now. You've got that early disruption syndrome thing where everybody decides they want in on this party, but most of them are not going to survive. So mostly what's going to happen is a lot of these companies will either go bankrupt or merge or something like that, or get bought up by bigger companies. And eventually it will consolidate down to, let's say, 5 to 10 with BYD in the apparent lead. So EV demand is still going up. Yes, it's going to be lumpy over the next couple of years. And yes, there will be people who will jump on that and say that the EV demand has gone away, but it's because the consumer of electric vehicles is shifting. That's the really important part. So who is this new consumer? I think they're the third wave consumer. The first wave is the bleeding edge, buy the Tesla Roadster in 2010 kind of person who has cash and also has a real interest in this new technology and thinks it's really cool. The second wave adopters, and I will include myself and my wife in this, are the people who purchase it when it's gone more mainstream, but it's still not fully mainstream. And those people are like tech enthusiasts. And I'm not just talking about EVs, but lots of technology. Anyway, they're tech enthusiasts. They're willing to try something out that is not fully mainstream yet. They're willing to risk something for what they believe is a really good product, but not everything. So that's why they're the second wave. And then the third wave consumer is the consumer that's the kind of straight line in the S curve. It's once it's reached its tipping point and it becomes obvious that it's economically more viable and the experience is going to be at least as good, if not better, than what they've been using before. That's the group of people in the middle who will be like, yeah, okay, maybe we'll go for this and maybe we'll see. But they are much, much more careful and conservative and discerning than the first two waves of consumers. And that group of people is not just going to buy an EV because it says EV. In other words, they're not going to look at a Chevy or a Ford or a VW or whatever and say, oh, it says EV, I'm going to buy that. They're going to say, is this a better car than this internal combustion engine alternative? Also, is it a better or worse car than the competition that's out there? Remember, they're conservative. They're also probably a little more price conscious than these first couple of waves of consumers. So they're going to be very careful about how they spend their money. And of course, when you look at it, there's really not a lot of competition to Tesla, again, except maybe in China. Tesla is way out ahead of these other car companies. And if you do comparison shopping between them, if you make the decision to buy an EV, the obvious choice is to purchase these Teslas over other car manufacturers. And that, I believe, is a major factor in why Tesla's Model Y is going to be the best-selling vehicle in the world in 2023. And then, of course, we can layer on top of all of this that current economic times are very challenging. Interest rates have gone up drastically from what they were just a year or two ago. Inflation has gone up quite a bit. The average cost of goods has gone up quite a bit. The consumer is much more uncertain about the future. And so people are putting off large purchases. And again, this is the biggest purchase behind a house for most people. So that means you're taking a conservative third wave consumer and you're making them ultra conservative because of the larger economic conditions. And that means that affordability is key right now. So it's not whether you want something or not, right? I could want a new mega yacht. That would be awesome. In fact, I do. That would be really cool to have, right? But I can't afford that. In my wildest dreams, I can't afford it. So it really doesn't matter what I want for something like that. I can't afford it, period. My salary simply will never allow me. The amount of money I make in my entire lifetime would never allow me to buy a mega yacht. And so for many people, it's not that extreme, but they might be like, look, I'm making, $55,000 a year, can't afford a $50,000 vehicle no matter how much I want that vehicle. And this is where Tesla's very aggressive price cuts have really come into the fore. They have the capability, because they've had high profit margins, to strip and strip and strip and strip and strip the amount of money that they make off of each car and still be cash flow positive. So, people get concerned about the gross margins and everything every quarter, and everyone's freaking out about the fact that it's not as much as it was. This was obviously going to happen with the economic times going on. With high interest and inflation combined, it was obvious that Tesla was going to have to strip this down to make the cars more affordable to keep clearing out what they're producing. But this has the knock-on effect of just crushing the competition, because they were making, if you look at Ford's reports, right? We just looked at that graph where they made negative $1.3 billion last quarter on their EV sales. Well, they can't afford to cut the costs more, because otherwise they'll be unprofitable as a company, right? If they lose $1.7 billion, they're break even. If they lose $2 billion on their EV sales, that's more than the profit they make on their ICE cars. So they just can't afford to do this. They can't afford to go down. Same thing for other companies, even though we don't have quite as much insight into their EV divisions. So Tesla is able to reduce the sticker price of their cars. And of course, people don't have to go to dealers and haggle. It's much, much easier to buy a Tesla. If you don't know, you should definitely check it out. In fact, check out my link in the description, because you can, click on that link, go in and look at how easy it is to purchase a Tesla right now. It's just a couple of minutes to buy one, and you can get $500 or $1,000 off if you use my link. So the broader question then becomes, why would anybody buy not a Tesla if you're looking at an EV? So I think people's choices right now are either internal combustion engine vehicle for a certain amount of money, or a Tesla. They're not really looking at other EV manufacturers. Why would you undergo a worse experience going to a dealership to buy an EV when you can purchase a Tesla for cheaper in just a couple of minutes on your phone? So the real question to me is why Legacy Auto is selling any EVs right now. It seems like everyone would just buy a Tesla. I think a lot of that comes down to imperfect consumer knowledge. When you do economics 101, they always say if you have a consumer who has perfect knowledge of the situation, they will always do X. Well, the problem is that that never happens in reality. And here we're running up against reality and Tesla not advertising yet. Waves 1 and 2 of consumers were willing to do their own research and really go out there, and they knew about Tesla beforehand because they're very aggressive in the tech space and paying attention. The third wave of consumers is much more passive initially. They want to be told to go look at the cars. Yes, they will do research and comparison shop after they, initially get going, but they're a much more passive consumer to start with, and they need to be fed that information, which is exactly the reason why I have been advocating for quite a while that Tesla needs to advertise. It's not because of the first and second wave consumers, but those consumers have pretty much already purchased cars. You need to get to that third wave of consumers, and that third wave is a group of people that needs to be coaxed into understanding the benefits of a Tesla. They don't just know offhand and automatically like people in the first couple of waves already do. So yes, demand for EVs has certainly softened over the last year or so, and that's a big deal, but demand for Teslas in particular has not softened. They produced less cars last quarter, yes, but they've projected around 475,000 deliveries this quarter, and if and when they get to that number, it's going to show that Tesla is still growing. And what we'll see is a growing division between Tesla and other Western EV makers. I'm not including China. China is like a whole different ballgame. It's its own thing. I really think that China is going to be in the United States very aggressively soon. They're already starting to do that in Europe. Europe is already very afraid they're losing their domestic market to Chinese imports. It's the beginning of that right now, but the floodgates have started to open. That could happen in the United States very, very soon as well. We saw Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, recently go to the BYD plant and praise them and say they were the best. I was like, oh, dude, be careful about that. Tesla is still based in California. They're still making a heck of a lot of cars there. So that seems like a bad move on the California governor's part. You don't really want to crack that open any sooner than it's going to naturally. It will happen eventually anyway. The Chinese car manufacturers are going to get to the United States, but there's no reason to speed that up because they are going to have a devastating impact on that for possibly Tesla, but mostly for Legacy Auto. But at this point, it's becoming pretty clear that the big three in the United States, that's GM, Ford, and Stellantis, used to be Chrysler, are rapidly becoming irrelevant in this transition. And the fact that they're starting to slow roll their EV transition because it's costing too much money is a very, very bad mistake on their part. If they slow these things down by several years, that just means that somebody else is going to fill that void. And the likely candidates to fill that void are number 1, Tesla, and number 2, Chinese auto manufacturers. All right, so on that note, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon patrons, my YouTube channel members, and of course, my ex-subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla, a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. And by the way, go Dogs! Go Dogs against Florida. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.